restrictions on the banks and Wall Street, people are just going to stay home. And why they would allow this to happen, it's beyond me.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like when you listen to Democrats talk about election prospects, they're convinced they're going to lose. You would expect that would free them up to try something.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Right.
You know, it's kind of like, okay, the boat is taking in water. Do we just sit here, or do we pick up the Dixie cup that's over here and start bailing? I mean, we may not make it, but you know,
yeah.
Do something. Do something, Democrats. Are you listening to me?
Mike, one last moment. I know that today specifically, is an important date for your family.
Oh, right. I was telling you this, right.
Yeah.
Yes, my uncle, Lawrence Moore, was killed on this day 65 years ago today in World War II.
Wow.
And it's my dad's brother. And oh yeah, I brought along a little, that's him in the center there.
Sure to show this, yeah.
And thank you for honoring him and doing that. That's him in the center. That's my dad on the left. And they called him Warnie. And my dad said he was the kind of guy that gave you the shirt off his back, and he gave his life for this country and on this day in the Philippines in World War II. So thank you for doing that.
Sure. And, I mean, one of the things that's so powerful about the way you tell your stories is that you do involve yourself and your family in the way that you do it. And it's why people are interested in you as a guy as well as being interested in your films. And it's why I've really enjoyed having the chance to meet you.
Well,
thank you for coming in.
Thank you. Thank you. You're a force for good and a national treasure.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, show's over. Goodbye. I have to go.
You're doomed now.
I peaked. It's done. Michael Moore, of course, Oscar-winning documentary filmmaker. His latest film is called Capitalism, a Love Story, and it is out right now on DVD. So I was away for a couple of days. Good job, lamb chop. And that gave us the chance to air sort of a special on Monday about the ways in which health reform has almost died. Now that it looks like we probably are actually going to get health reform, it seemed like a good idea to make sure that we haven't forgotten all the different ways that health reform came under attack. The assault on reform that I still find most frustrating and mystifying is what Democratic Senator Max Baucus did to it back last summer before the August recess. You remember that one? It was last summer. Health reform had passed all 3 of the committees it needed to pass in the House. It had passed in the Senate Health Committee. It just needed to pass one last committee, the Senate Finance, and then Congress could move forward and vote on a final bill. Now, Democrats have such big majorities in both houses of Congress that they have big majorities on every committee as well. So on the Senate Finance Committee, there are 3 more Democrats than there are Republicans. But Max Baucus, the chair of that committee, inexplicably decided to give up his own party's majority, and instead of negotiating in the committee, which is the way laws are made, he decided to just work it out with a gang of 6, with 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans, as if the election never happened, as if Democrats and Republicans had equal numbers in the Senate, which they don't. And what was the result? These supposed negotiations in this bipartisan kumbaya gang of 6 senators stretched on and on and on. And because it was taking so long to execute this awesome bit of Max Baucus strategery, any chance that health reform might get done then, before the August recess, like the White House wanted, was destroyed. Looking back now, it seems crazy that the Democratic leadership ever even conceived of getting reform passed by last summer. But they really could have done it, if not for Max Baucus deciding to unilaterally give up the Democratic majority that people voted in and that prevailed on his committee. Even if that weren't the main procedural reason we still don't have health reform now, which is what I believe, it would still be mystifying to me that anybody would do something like that anybody would just voluntarily give up their majority in order to negotiate on a 50-50 split with Republicans who don't make up even close to 50% of either House of Congress. And yet somehow, believe it or not, this same thing is happening again. It's a gang of 2 this time, and it's Wall Street reform this time. The gang of 2 is Democratic Senator Chris Dodd of Connecticut, head of the Banking Committee, and Republican Senator Bob Corker of Tennessee. There are 3 more Democrats on that committee than there are Republicans, but rather than work out a Wall Street reform package within this committee with its 13-10 Democratic majority, Senator Dodd decided instead to pretend like the 2008 election never happened, to pretend like it's a 50-50 split in the Senate and on his committee, to pretend like Democrats don't have a majority, and he decided to work out a financial reform plan 50-50, primarily between him and his friend Bob. How's that gone so far? Well, as he began negotiations, Senator Corker said at the outset that he couldn't support a standalone consumer financial protection agency. He said he'd be unwilling to back mandatory limits on bank size. He said he was against out-of-court resolutions for failing companies. And now Bob Corker has landed himself on the front page of the New York Times for pushing to remove the part of the reform bill that cracked down on loan sharks. I mean, payday lenders. An industry that makes its money by charging mostly low-income clients the equivalent of a 300% or 400% annual interest rate on short-term loans. And coincidentally enough, it's an industry that is a significant contributor to Senator Corker's campaigns. Senator Corker today denied that he is trying to get special treatment for payday lenders, I mean loan sharks, I mean payday lenders, written into the financial reform bill. But the question remains, why does he get a say at all? Why is he working this out with Chris Dodd? Why does Bob Corker get anything other than to be part of a minority vote against what the majority Democrats come up with? Joining us now is Congressman Barney Frank, Democrat of Massachusetts and chairman of the House Financial Services Committee. Mr. Chairman, welcome back to the show. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Rachel.
You've already passed financial reform legislation in the House. Your version would create an independent consumer financial protection agency. Are you worried that the Senate will negotiate that away?
I am. Let me say first, I have a great deal of respect for Chris Dodd, and he's been an advocate and a champion of the right things. And if he were writing the bill, he and I, we would have the bill written. The Senate's a stranger place procedurally, but what began to trouble me was people were acting as if whatever deals were made in the Senate to deal with the filibuster, et cetera, that somehow that would be the law. And we passed our bill, as you noted, in December. It wasn't everything I wanted. It is a much tougher bill than it appears to be emerging in some ways from the Senate. And an independent consumer agency, we are requiring that if someone wants to be your broker and sell you stocks, he or she has to have a fiduciary responsibility to you. That is, really have your interests at heart. We cover payday lenders in what we give the consumer agency. There are other areas where we're tougher. And so I just made this announcement. We are going to wait for the Senate to pass the bill. I hope it's a better bill than there have been some indications. I hope Senator Dodd is able to get what he really wants through. But if not, we're going to have a House-Senate conference. And we're going to give my conservative Republican friends what they claim we've wanted. I'm not sure they do. We're going to do this in television. I'm going to ask for a House-Senate conference, and we will then sit there, members of the House, members of the Senate, and we will negotiate this out. And my own view, Rachel, is that some of these people are eager to accommodate the banks by killing an independent consumer agency in private negotiations. Will be less willing to vote that way on C-SPAN.
In terms of the specific fate of the Consumer Financial Protection Agency, one of the things that's been floated is that, at least as Republicans see it, the problem is that the agency is independent. They say instead, why not put it inside the Fed? What do you think about that prospect?
Well, that's what we've had. Consumer protection in our federal banking laws has for years been in the various bank regulatory agencies as a second or third choice. The Federal Reserve has, in fact, been the major area where consumer protection was lodged. And I guess you can say that the consumer protection powers of the Fed are in very good shape because they haven't been used. They've been kind of preserved. Now, it is true that unlike Alan Greenspan, Chairman Bernanke has done a couple of good things in the consumer area, but every time the Federal Reserve has moved, it's after the Democrats won Congress in 2006 and after we took over the Financial Services Committee, and after we initiated a reform. They have moved on credit cards, they have moved on overdrafts, they have moved on a couple of other things, like mortgages, but only after we prodded them. So the notion that you would leave this to any bank regulator is a mistake. And it's ironic. What some of the conservatives are saying, it's really much more critical of banks than maybe anybody except Michael, which is that if you have an independent consumer regulator that ensures fairness, the banks will be in trouble. That the financial solvency of the banks, apparently, according to some of these people, depends on them being able to mistreat consumers. Part of the problem here is we haven't seen enough lending from the banks. To the extent that banks can make money by inducing you to overdraft and charging you disproportionately or retroactively raising the interest rate in your credit cards, they make enough money with these tricks so they don't have to lend. And we want to cut off these other ways of making money at the consumer's expense. At any rate, we're going to have this out in public. We will have a nice, big, open conference and let the Republicans and others, Democrats who may agree with them, who don't want derivatives toughly regulated, who don't want an independent consumer agency, let's have a debate and vote on that in the public area.
Congressman Barney Frank, Democrat of Massachusetts, chairman of the House Financial Services Committee. I look very much forward to doing the play-by-play when that happens in public, and we thank you for joining us tonight, sir. Thanks.
Thank you, Rachel.
Critics argue, when you think about it, for the most part, all the people who have tried to blow airliners out of the sky pretty much look alike.
I'm for one. I know it's not politically correct to say it. I believe in racial and ethnic profiling. I think if you're looking at people getting on an airplane and you have X amount of resources to get into it, you need to get at the targets. Not my wife.
Not my wife. I know not one thing about Senator James Inhofe's wife, nor should I. I would not want her to want to drag her into this or anything else. But the latest al-Qaeda-related terrorism arrest in the United States makes the argument for getting the terrorists by using racial profiling even more awkward and dumb than it's always been. Colleen LaRose is a 46-year-old American woman who lived in Pennsburg, Pennsylvania, about an hour north of Philly. She apparently used the name Jihad Jane on online extremist web forums. The Department of Justice arrested her back in